Absolutely. So thank you, Avi, for the introduction. I'm going to give you a little bit more about who I am and what I do. But I'm super thrilled, super stoked to be here talking to this audience. And as Avi mentioned, I am the Chief Digital Officer at Twilio. For those of you who do not know Twilio, it's a modern-day communications provider. And we are a company that is loved immensely by developers all over the world. And they love building on top of our communications platform, trying to make sure that they can create engagement and, with their customers. And we are kind of in the gig economy. We are so used to having those interactions and engagements with the brands that we love, and sometimes the brands that we don't love either. And so Twilio powers a lot of that. And the reason I give you a little bit of this is not a pitch for Twilio, not at all. I'm not here to sell you anything, but I'm going to borrow some of the examples of my experience at Twilio as I talk through the next, what we have about an hour with us. And really what I'm trying to get through, Avi mentioned that it's a different kind of a keynote. What I'm trying to get through here is, I'm sure several of you, obviously, you're all representing different aspects of security, and you're gathered here at this conference. And I've had a wonderful journey in my career. I've been working for a number of years now, too many to count. And I've gone from product management, managing engineering teams, to security, starting with application security, moving on to other domains of security. And then at this current state, with being the Chief Digital Officer at Twilio, I also manage a wide expanse of a technology portfolio that is under me. So I do want to talk a little bit to you about how careers are built. There's no set recipe to careers, and there is only ingredients that we each bring to our own career. We are the owners of our own cookbook. We are our own chefs. No one's going to write that book for us. And that being in security gives you this wonderful platform to pivot off from if you want to. If you want to pivot off the platform and go somewhere else, security offers that to you. And if you want to continue being in security, and if you are in application security or product security, there are several other domains of security, and you can have an extremely fulfilling, very exciting career in security.
That's fantastic. And you really have had kind of a unique career. Product management isn't the typical place that we have people coming from into security. Definitely should be more of that. So what actually drove you moving from that into security?
So now you're asking me to sit in a time machine and go back. So let me do that for the audience here. And I'll spend some time on this. I'm hoping I'm not going to come here and recite my resume to you, but I'll talk about some of the positions that I've taken in my life, some of the roles I've taken in my life, because that gives context to today's keynote. And I did start as a product manager. I've managed products, hardware products, software products, too many to count. I've built them from nothing. I've killed them on the way in some cases. I was in India initially, and then I moved to the US. And the reason I talk a lot about product management is that gave me the ability to put myself into the shoes of my customers, into the shoes of my stakeholders. And I think it's because that was my foundation. I've carried that throughout my career. Anything that is under my remit, I treat it as a product. I think of what value does that provide to my customer. So whether it is security, whether it is IT now, I always think like that. And then you asked me about this shift from product management to security. And I think it's a combination of a few different things. I think stars aligned. And I was at the right place at the right time. And I think it's a combination of that and probably a little bit of taking the opportunities that are given to you and making the most out of it. There was a lot of hard work involved. I don't minimize that. But I moved into, I was at a point in my career journey at EMC Corporation. This is going back 2005. And EMC was trying to get into, I have a few of my EMC friends here, sitting here, old EMC colleagues. I carry my relationship with them very fondly, even today, 20 years later. And I think at that point, we were trying to get into what should be the security story around EMC. So again, going into what could I give to that particular opportunity, I decided to take on the ownership. I'd put my hand up to take on the ownership for defining what product security looks like for security, for EMC, with a bunch of other very able people who made me look really good at the end of the day because they were the ones who were defining a lot of it, but I was the one helping them, leading them into what that story looks like. So I spent years doing that. I was at EMC, and I think several of you this will resonate with several of you. And the first couple of years of that story was all around going and running into the challenge of why should I care about security, right? We build these big, huge storage boxes that go somewhere in the data warehouse. And why should, as an engineer at EMC, why should I care about security? And so we had to have those conversations about, hey, these things are getting internet connected. These things have software running on them. And these things are hackable. And so we built that entire thing out, product security. And I did that for a number of years with very able people with me. And then I got the opportunity of doing more cloud security and moved into Autodesk. And I built that out for them. And then I ended up becoming the chief security officer at Autodesk, did that for a few years. And then the Twilio opportunity came to me where, as I said, Twilio is a company loved by developers. So I really wanted to figure out, hey, what that opportunity entails for me. And they brought to me an opportunity that I could not say no to because it's a combination of security and IT. And I can tell you this, several of you who are here have probably asked this question to each other or to yourselves around the fact that, hey, any technology decision I need to make in this company sits with the CIO or with the head of R&D. And at Twilio, I got that combination of the opportunities where I could go and take my passion of security and marry that with technology. And if the right time comes, and we'll talk hopefully about that later in the conversation, if the right time comes, I can take decisions that actually enable us to push the security agenda forward. And then I'm also on the board of Rapid7 now. I'm sure several of you know this company. And the reason I took the board seat, and I'll get to that, but let me see, how many of you are CISOs in companies? Are there any hands up here? Okay, very, very limited number. But, and I cannot see because the lights are so harsh on me, I cannot see. I'll ask a question and then people are raising hands and I won't even know. But I took on that role because I wanted to be on the other side of the table. So for the longest time, I was going into these board meetings and speaking to the board members and in many cases educating them about security. And I wanted to be on the other side and see what and how a board thinks and be in that governance role. And I think CISOs have this great opportunity where the board is going to talk more and more about cyber. It's becoming a very hot topic it already is a hot topic. And so I did that. And so it's a mishmash of things, Avi, and that's where it leads us to here.
It's fantastic. If I may, I want to pull on one of the threads that you mentioned. So coming from the product management, basically nobody was pushing security into the product, and you had that passion to pull that into the product management. So I want to ask you, how did that play out there, and how does that play out now in where you are now at Twilio through that security product management?
So you're talking to me and you're asking me a question about, hey, how have I used security as a business enabler?
Sure.
Or do you want me to talk a little bit more about, hey, how I see things change over the course of the last?
Yeah, let's talk about how things have changed.
Okay, let's talk about that, right? It's a very very good question that I get asked all the time about, hey, I've spent years in security, and what has changed? And are we good now, or are we at a stage which is worse than we were in the past? And I think a lot has changed, but a lot is still the same, right? And we are sitting in the OWASP conference, right? And before I even get into OWASP, right, I'll tell you this. I was at the first job that was given to me, which was in AppSec. I remember the manager there telling me, your job is to get out of this job. And what he meant was, at that time, was, hey, make application and product security so ubiquitous that this discipline is not needed anymore. And where are we today? We are at a state where we're still doing AppSec conferences, right? We're talking about OWASP Top 10. You and I were discussing that earlier. And the first time I looked at the OWASP Top 10 was back in 2006, I think. And now when I look at the OWASP top 10, which is I think the 2021 version of it, and I still find very similar things. I find broken access control, broken authentication, session management issues. I do see more insecure design in there now, which did not exist at that time. And I don't see buffer overflows, which used to be the bane of my existence back in 2006. But I think a lot, and I say this not to point any fingers here or to say, hey, things haven't changed. Things have actually changed, and I think things are way more complex now. Applications are way more complex. We live in a world of APIs, microservices. Things are super complex. The complexity has only increased. And so I actually look at the role of application security, product security, to be even more important today, right? And let me ask you a couple of questions. Actually, I'm going to ask you a question because I want to involve you in this conversation. You're just asking me questions, but let's see. I'll give you some questions and give me your answers on this. Do you know how many SaaS companies exist in the world today?
Well, if you're asking about SaaS, I would say about 300,
SaaS.
all of them downstairs.
Yeah.
SaaS. There's a lot more SaaS companies, many.
So they're about, at last, I was looking at some data, getting ready for this conference. At last count, I think there are like 70,000 plus SaaS companies in the world. And there are about 28 million developers in the world today, software developers, 28 million.
That's a lot.
50% more than 20 years back. And the projection is that we are going to be at 45 million in 2030. So now think about the number of people, and I'll be honest with you, we still haven't done a great job of putting product application security into colleges and universities. So think about the number of people making mistakes, coding mistakes, secure design mistakes. And so how many more application and product security people do we need? We need quite a lot of them, right? So that is where we are, and I don't want to be admiring the problem here. I also want to talk a little bit about what I think must change in the future, right? And the way I look at this is application security is not easy, and our developers' jobs are not easy either, right? They spend their entire day looking at alerts, things getting triaged to them, so many tools being thrown at them, people coming to them from all possible angles. You need to pay attention to security. You need to pay attention to performance. I need to pay attention to resiliency. It's a constant, never-ending stream of things. And an average developer spends less than 90 minutes a day coding, okay? So now I'm going to lean into my product management background and think about my customer. My customer, if I'm an application security or a product security person, my customer is who? They're the developers. And so what do we need to do? So my ask of my application and product security teams is very simple. It is about that we have to really lean into understanding the world of our developers. We really have to go in and maximize value and minimize pain. For long, we have been talking about shifting left, and we've been talking about paved paths, right? We talk about that quite a lot as a security industry. And I think we really need to embrace that and provide those paved paths to our customers, to our developers. And some examples of what I've done, and the intent should not be that I'm just talking at you and giving you a lecture, but the intent is, hey, I've actually done that with my teams in the past. And my application security teams have gone and come up with things like security non-negotiables, which are a list of things where, hey, these are the things that we expect our engineers and developers to build. This is the what. And the how could be different. And that's the paved path approach that I really think we need to get to. And I know you talk about threat modeling, Avi, right?
I do talk about threat modeling.
Right? You talk quite a lot about threat modeling. I have never had an application security team under my remit who hasn't told me that threat modeling is one of the most critical product security, application security practices. But it's also one of the most onerous. Yep. Right? It takes time. You cannot just sit down and take hours and hours of a developer and ask them to do threat modeling. And so really the concept of threat modeling at the time of a user story, rather than sitting down for hours and hours and doing threat modeling, is super critical. So these are some of the examples of, I think we are making progress. There's a ton of need around application and product security today. And I think we just need to continue to lean into understanding and embracing what our developers need from us, who are our end customers.
Can you share some specific examples of those paved paths or some incidents that you ran into that were challenging to deal with and how that changed your approach?
Yeah. So two different answers here, Avi. One is, I'll take your last one first, which is incidents, right? And so I grew up in, as I said, in RSA. My security journey started at EMC, which had gone out and acquired RSA. So I was at RSA or at EMC in 2011 when the big bad RSA breach happened. And 2 or 3 years back, I don't know when, but there was a big, huge Wired article that was written about the RSA breach. And I'm not going to talk about the RSA breach here, but I do encourage you, because when I read that article, shivers ran down my spine because I relived every moment of what was going on at that time, because we were involved, my team was involved in dealing with the breach as well. Read about that article if you want. But I quote that as a way to tell you that I'm pretty battle-hardened in having gone through what happened at RSA. And then I'll also talk a little bit about the current company that I'm at. About 2 years back, and again, this is public information. So the lawyers in the room, if they are from Twilio, I'm not doing anything wrong here in talking about what I'm saying here, but 2 years ago, we had a breach at Twilio. It's public, open, read about it on our blogs. And the way the breach was happening was the attackers were smishing our employees. And our employees they're human beings at the end of the day. And several of them are developers. They don't, I told you earlier about how difficult their day jobs are. And they were getting smished. And we needed to move, not just protect and secure the human factor, but we also realized that we needed to get an edge up on the second factor of authentication that we had, right? And so what we did was we ended up moving in the direction of FIDO2 compliant, WebAuthn as the second factor of authentication. And we did that in a matter of days for the entire company. 8,000 people in the company, and we had to go and make that move happen. And I had the ability to go and do that because I was the person who owned security as well as IT in the organization. And so going back to some of the career choices that I made, I had the ability to go do that because I decided, hey, this is where we should be because that's what security requires from us. And I had an IT organization behind me going out and doing this. Now, in a regular day, regular environment without a breach, this would have been an IT project, which takes months and months of planning and change management and IT holding office hours and making sure that they're hand-holding people. It took us days to go out and do that. And I say this as an example of when you are in a breach situation, take full advantage of the crisis, right? Because you're not going to get several of them. As a security person, I've learned this, that you take full advantage of a crisis, of a breach that has happened, and you invest where you can. The second example of, you asked me about what do I take with me when it comes to incidents, is leaning into transparency. So again, going back to putting myself into the shoes of my customers, what do they want from us, right? They want us to tell them what has happened and be open and clear. And I've had several battles with my lawyers about what I can say and what I cannot say during a breach. I'm sure several of you have been in that position yourself as well. And but I lean into transparency. And I'll be honest with you, what that gives us from a transparency standpoint is when I'm sitting in front of a customer and the CISO of that customer is sitting in front of us asking me questions, never have I heard them say to me, you didn't do your job. Because they understand what my job is. They know that we are the cleanup crew when it comes to these kind of security incidents. So building that relationship and having that transparency is super important too. And then you asked me a question about paved paths, right? Building security into the dev lifecycle, right? Absolutely. Bring in, threat modeling is the one that is not yet, in my opinion, where I have been. I've struggled in really bringing it into a paved path kind of a concept. But I lean into platform engineering organizations. I'm lucky and fortunate. I think I work in a cloud-native organization where we have a focus of having a platform engineering organization that focuses on developer experience. And so they are our best friends. They are the ones who are building paved paths for developers in general. So make them your best friends and put security as part of those paved paths as well, so that when you're talking about vulnerability scanning happening and source code and static analysis scanning happening, it's part of the pipeline, part of the life cycle.
We're going to talk more about threat modeling later, and PyFast. But that's really interesting because there's always an ongoing. Pop into Twitter any day of the week, you're going to find an argument about who should security report to, and there's conflicting interests, and they have to be separate as a check on that. But with the way you're presenting it, it really shows how valuable that is. It's not just just a cost center. It becomes a business enabler, right? So how can you prove? Or how do you show and display to the business, to the board, to the executives, you speak in that language, how can you actually show that value?
Yeah, so very, very important question, and I think a question that we have grappled with for years now, right? Every security organization deals with this question. And at this current moment, and I think in the last 2 jobs that I've been in, I think I've been lucky to work for companies that care about security enough. And at the end of the day, it comes down to what do your customers care about the most, right? And if your customers don't care about security today, they will when something bad happens. I can assure you of that, right? That absolutely happens in the life of every security professional. And I fundamentally believe, Avi, that there are 2 kinds of companies in the world, right? There are the ones who want to build trust from the get-go, and they want to do everything they can to continue to maintain that trust. Bad things happen all the time, but they still want to continue to do everything they can. And then there are the companies that don't care much about building trust, but will care when something bad happens, right? So if you work for a company that actually fundamentally believes in building trust with their customers, lean in and offer yourself as a security professional and go to your product and R&D teams and say, hey, I'm here to have conversations with your customers around security, right? I'm here, I'll be happy to have those conversations. Many companies have customer advisory boards as an example. Put up your hand and say, hey, I want to talk about security at these customer advisory boards, right? And make yourself available. Create relationships with your, this has worked for me, so I'm just going to say what has worked for me. Creating relationships with your peers in your customers' security organizations, right? Lean into the ecosystem, try to talk to them, and bring that value back to the organization. Now, if you work for a company, which was, I talked about the 2, and if you work for a company that falls into the second category, I think the fact that you have a job there as a security professional, somebody cares about security. Now, there's always a possibility there's a checkbox, they want to do this, and they want to hire you. I get that. But educate people. For a long time, we've been thinking about, hey, we have a job to do as a security person. We need to protect this company, et cetera, et cetera. But half of our jobs is about being good salespeople on security. I'm constantly, daily selling the value of security to my organization, to my IT organization, to my R&D organization. You've got to do that, right? And if you can, lean into data. Go and find data about, my product security teams have done this in the past very successfully, where they've gone and said, let's figure out how many security incidents and what kind of security incidents have been coming into our CERT. Go look at that data and correlate that back to the same. Did you find those types of vulnerabilities that got exploited in a threat model? Did you find those vulnerabilities in your product security practices that you have put in place? And if you did, create a nice presentation, snazzy data, driven presentation, and take it to people in the organization. Say, hey, if we had done the right things in these areas in the past, we could have done so much more in protecting and preventing these incidents from happening. So I think leaning into data, making sure that you can be the best salespeople that, from a security people. I'm not asking you to become like this, snake oil selling salespeople, right? I'm asking you to really lean into what you believe is fundamental around security and using data. And I'm also saying to you that people in executive positions, executive management positions, right? they care a lot about data-driven conversations. And if you can do that and you can drive that conversation, that enables you to prove the value of security quite often. At least that's been my experience, Avi.
Yeah, I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, if you don't mind. It sounds, we're in San Francisco, so I can use the hipster term of product-led growth. It sounds like you're describing something effectively product-led security. I don't remember who, I heard that somewhere. So could you talk a little bit more about how to actually show this? Maybe have some examples, how to, product teams and product and apps teams can actually demonstrate that value to executive management, to their customers, to their other stakeholders.
So you said product-led security, is that what you said? So I would turn that around and say it's security-led growth, right? That's what you're asking me to say,
sure.
right? And
That's
how do you prove that security can actually help you with the growth of the organization? So again, depends a lot on which type of company you're working for, right? If you're in a company so let me give you some example that's close to my heart right now. So I work for a company where we have certain security adjacent products. And my product managers and engineers actually depend on my security team to validate a lot of concepts, a lot of features that we are putting into our products, either security features or even in the security adjacent products. We act in some cases as customer zero, where we come in and we say, okay, if you were to sell this feature to me, and I'm on the other side, and I'm the CISO of a customer that we are selling to, what would my reaction be? And in several cases, we have actually done this very effectively, where we've gone and said, the product is not ready yet. I would not bring this product into an enterprise. And then we work together in identifying, hey, what are the kinds of things and features that will make this product work better? Right? We talk a lot about enabling MFA. But what is the experience of enabling an MFA, right? What does a customer feel like when you throw MFA at them? And then many times we also have this conversation about, hey, we do offer MFA on the services that we give, but customers just decided not to use it, right? As a security professional, you sit down and you say, okay, what should that customer experience look like for enabling MFA, right? And how do you actually go out and do that? So I think these are some of the examples that come to my mind. The other thing that works and has worked in other organizations that I have been part of as well is the role of a BISO. So we've heard the role of a BISO, right?
I've heard of it,
How many of you have heard the role of a BISO? What is a BISO? You guys have, right? So it's a Business Information Security Officer. We call them that. And they sit somewhere in the middle between a security team and an R&D team. So think of them as almost matrixed to the R&D organization. And what they do is they definitely represent what security wants an R&D organization to do, but they also take back what R&D wants security to do. So we have invested in the BISO organization. They are also at the front end of talking to our customers very regularly, going in and having conversations around security, doing objection handling. I have a security enablement team that sits in my organization and actually helps close deals. So
brilliant.
The reason that works in a company like mine, and again, it's not a recipe that will work for everyone, but in my organization it works because we actually sell software as a service and people and customers, and we have enterprise class customers, and they care a ton about security. So making yourself available to have those conversations is super critical, and it definitely is helpful. Then I'll give you one more example, Avi. So I mentioned earlier about the security non-negotiables, and those are like the paved paths, right? It's the starting of a paved path. It's not really completely a paved path because it really talks about the what we must accomplish in a security as a security organization. And then we work with engineers in figuring out the how better. But one of the brilliant ideas that a person on my team in the past had was they took those security non-negotiables that we had established for the company, and they mapped it to the top 10 most asked questions coming from security questionnaires and security and RFIs. And they said, look at this. I'm asking you to do something, not because I think I'm just building something out of nowhere. I'm asking you to do these security things because our customers care about them the most. So I think some of those techniques are definitely helpful. The other thing I will say is like, your CISO is very busy. I get that. I know there's a couple of CISOs here. But if you work for an organization where you're obviously reporting into the CISO, give them feedback. Ask them to bring customers to have conversations with your product and engineering organizations, right? Bring them to the table, have those conversations, ask them questions about what they care about the most, and build that sort of understanding and that mind share. And that enables us to add better value to why we think security is critical in the organization.
That's absolutely brilliant because that shows security closing deals.
Yes.
It increases sales because nobody wants to not get hacked. They want to close sales.
In fact, you brought up a very good point. In fact, my security enablement team is one of the teams in my organization that gets the most kudos from sales, from product, because they are the ones out there helping them close deals. And they are also the ones, by the way, I mentioned that breach that happened 2 years back. They were on the front lines having the conversations with the customers, having the conversations with the CISOs on the customer end, and telling them what had happened, telling them what we did to improve our state. And in fact, in several cases, walking out of the conversation saying, hey, the security team on the other side said, I'm so glad you're doing this. In fact, we should do it in our organization too.
Wow.
Right? And so that is definitely that has been super critical for us to build that value out in the company.
That's amazing because I've heard it said, people don't pay extra for security, but they'll pay less if you don't have it. You don't pay extra for seatbelts, but you won't buy the car without the seatbelts. So that helps that.
That's a very good point you're bringing up. The seatbelt analogy, right, that you bring up, right? I think I've heard many security people talk about comparing security to safety, right? Yeah. And there was a time, I think seatbelts came around, in the 60s, at least in the US, from what I can tell, right? And it took forever to get them to a point where people said, this is just part of a car going forward. This is just going to be there, right? And it took them forever to get to that state. I think we are still at that state in security, right? And we need to do more and more to compare and contrast and bring security into hey, this is a safety conversation that we are having.
Basic client expectations change over time, and that's clearly reflected in a lot of your clients as well, if that happens. So you talked about earlier about some things that you review it and you won't let it come into the organization. That's a great place to talk about it. Things like new technologies like AI.
Okay.
Okay. So as things evolve, right? And I'm using AI as something fun to pick on. Emerging security requirements. How do you see them adapting to this type of thing? How do you make sure that you can stay ahead of things that are rapidly changing? The business, the R&D constantly trying to bring new things in. How do you keep up with that? And
how do you keep up with that?
Adapt.
So I didn't think you will go to AI immediately, right? Because I know your views about AI, right? We can have a full keynote, guys, here with Avi talking about AI. But before we go to AI, right? Before we go to AI, let me talk a little bit about what I face today as in the role that I'm in, right? I'm the person responsible for managing budgets on security tooling and IT tooling and all kinds of tools, right? Millions and millions of dollars and hundreds of tools, okay? And I think we have a plethora of tools. There's no deficiency in how many tools we have, right? And I think you and I were talking earlier, and we were talking about there's a tool for everything, right? If you really look around. And I remember, I'll give you an anecdote here. I remember going for my first RSA conference was in the year 2006. And I think the same person who told me, hey, your job should be to get out of your job, said to me that this conference is not going to be around for long, right? Because it's just going to get folded into technology. I have people in the front row, by the way, banging their head when I say this, right? And this last RSA conference had about 40,000 people attending,
yep.
Right?
I guess it's like 640K should be enough for everybody.
Sure. And so that's the in my opinion, we have had this notion of a tool to solve world peace that has existed for the longest time, And I face this with my security teams, I face this with my IT teams. So one sort of call to action that I'll have for folks who are representing perhaps tool vendors here, they're all outside, but if they're inside here as well, just please listen to me. Let's work on the pre-existing conditions that we have around security. Like I talked about the fact that we still have so many of the same issues, OWASP top 10 issues as I was talking about, right? Sit down with your security teams that you're working with, right? Again, going back into my product management sort of hat, sit with your security teams, kind of go figure out how their jobs are difficult. They're not easy, right? I talked about the jobs of developers. The jobs of security teams are even more difficult, right? They have to go sell security to the very busy developers. They have to manage security and protect the company all the time. So go talk to them, sit down with them, figure out what their pain points are. And I'm not saying they're not doing it, they're doing it. But then there's a new tool that comes in every other day. And it goes into this very nuanced, it can fix this particular issue for you, just buy it. And then this adds to one more tool coming in and one more tool coming in. Too many tools. There's just too many tools, right? And so that's going to be one, and I'll come to AI. Yeah. But I want to take this platform to address this plethora of tools issues that we are all facing. I see this very, very intimately every day because I sign those checks that are coming in and those POs that are coming in, right? And to these security teams, I do want to, there's a call to action for you as well, right? And I also want to call out to you that give a tool some time, right? I feel that we are super impatient as a community. We go out and we bring something in and there is a new shiny tool that comes in. And then we're like, take this out, we put another one in, right? And that just continues. And that just creates this ecosystem of we are never able to, and yet we are never able to actually deal with the conditions and the issues that we want to deal with. And so be patient and take some time, right? 6 months is not enough. Take some time. And then let's talk about, you're talking about AI. You asked me that question. You brought the term out, right? I don't think there is any conference, any keynote, any presentation that happens nowadays without AI being brought in, right? You tell me.
I can't control everything.
You don't have to, but that's the case. Now, let me address it in two different ways. As a security professional, when I wear that hat, to me, wearing the hat of a security professional, while I'm excited about AI, I'm also super nervous about AI. Like really, really nervous. I think AI can do a lot of good for us if used the right way, but the bad guys and the attackers are using AI too. So this is now a warfare between the bad guys and the good guys, right? So that will continue for some time. I think AI can do a lot of good when it comes to like threat detection, pattern matching, maybe in the security incident response side of the house on trying to get us to answering the question of who, what, when, where, quickly, right? But then we also talk a lot about, as security professionals, we talk a lot about, especially AppSec and ProductSec, we talk a lot about false positives. One of the big things that I keep hearing from my R&D and engineering organizations and wherever I've been is we swim in this sea of false positives all the time. And if we unleash AI, right, without a human in the loop, I personally think that the problem of false positives is going to increase. So these are, like, my thoughts are, I'm cautiously optimistic about AI, but then I'll also say, like, if I wear my IT hat, I think there's a lot of value from AI, right? I cannot throw people at the problem all the time, so I've got to lean into AI as another tool to help me solve for that problem. So while on the IT side, I'm very excited, I'm doing, like, I'll give you an example. We are doing, for our IT help desk, we have conversational AI as the way to address the normal common questions that our teams want addressed from an IT organization on a daily basis. And that's taken a lot of toil away from my IT organization, because they can now focus on more value-added, things that they can bring to the organization. So I think right there is this we are at that cusp, and so I'm going to continue having this cautious optimism. And I'll also say I was looking at OWASP did a top 10 on LLMs recently, right? And the first one is prompt injection, and then there are a bunch of them which talk about putting humans in the loop. So I think we are at that stage where we have to be cautiously optimistic. We should lean in, but not unleash AI completely out there. I think, I don't personally think, and again, opinions can be different for different people, but I don't personally think we are ready yet to do that.
So do you mind elaborating? So you talked about the business value of security in general. You talked about the business value that you could show with bringing AI in, and there's definitely business value there. Is there business value for that caution and applying those security controls to these new technologies? How do you show that business value of that part?
I think there's nothing different here. To me, AI is yet another technological change that we are dealing with, right? We've dealt with several of them over the course of the last several years, right? I talked about my journey. I started working in a first generation technology company like EMC. I went into Autodesk, which was just getting to the point of becoming cloud connected, and then I went into Twilio, which is part of the environment and the ecosystem that supports our gig economy, right? And so we've seen different iterations and different generations of technologies coming in, and we've adapted, right, as an organization. So what I'm asking for is, there's a ton of value in leaning in and learning. I think we are at that stage where we need to learn, and we need to see what that learning gets us to. But as a security professional, definitely, going back to the tools, most of the tool vendors that I deal with have some or the other AI capability that they've thrown in, right? They have. Now, how good is it? Whether it works, it doesn't work, that's the job of my security team to figure out. And so we will figure that out. We will continue. I know you want to say something to me. I know that. I can sense that. And please, add to the conversation. What do you think?
I have nothing nice to say about marketing buzzwords. There is absolute value in that. Like you say, take the humans out of the loop, move faster, show the value in that. Tacking it on with AI doesn't necessarily add that value.
Sure. And I agree. Having said that, I think it just is the transformation happened so quickly that somebody all of us in technology just woke up one day and said, we got to put out some architecture and marketing statements and PR around AI. Yeah. I get that. So there is a lot of hype. I'm with you about that. There's a lot of hype, but there's goodness too, and right. And you can, I gave you the example of the conversational AI chatbot that I have, right? Amazing stuff. I wasn't a proponent of it. I didn't like it when they originally said they're going to go do that. And I was like, there's no way that you're going to be able to, deflect tickets and actually have this particular piece take over, right, for us. And over the course of the last several months, things have gotten better, and we have actually utilized it better. It's not yet out there to just go and say, this is the way we do help desk tickets. No, but at the same time, it's done a great job of going and taking all our, knowledge base articles. And by the way, the AI problem is also a data problem. Let's not forget that. Till you get data, the handle on data well, you're not going to get a good handle on AI as well. Sure. So I think that's how I think of it. There's a hype. There's always a hype, right? There's always hype. Especially in security, there is. I'll come to another hype word later, but I'll park myself on that one right now. But when it comes to security, there have been several hype cycles. We've all seen it all. But having said that, I do think that there is transformation that's going to happen via AI, but we've got to be cautiously optimistic about it.
Good. Another one of the, so you're talking about AI as one of the tools that, has value and you manage that appropriately. Another tool that you mentioned was when you did the rollout of 2FA, right? The second factor authentication. And it sounded like you had a really good success there in balancing between the security and usability. I like to say security at the expense of usability comes at the expense of security. That's my own thing. So how do you do that? That was one example. Can you elaborate on your approach to how you balance between having, good, robust security and, good user experience for whatever value of user?
So you're asking me to wear both my hats at the same time, security and
it's finding
user
that
experience.
trade-off.
Yeah, how do you find that trade-off, right? You're asking me that question. And I just want to correct one thing, and I want to get this precise. We had a second factor. It was smishable. So we moved away from, when I talked about Twilio, we moved away from the more smishable factor to a less smishable factor. So I want to make sure that I go on record to saying what we did.
Stronger 2FA.
Stronger 2FA. Okay. Let's talk about that, right? And yes, let's take that example, right? And in that example, I cannot tell you how many Twilio employees came to me later and said, you have made life so much easier and so much simpler for me, right? I don't think we were there several years back in security, right? Think about, we've been talking passwordless forever, right? For the longest time. And finally, we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. We are getting in the direction where that can become a reality as well. And when you ask me about this balance that I have to do between security and usability, I'll give you, at the expense of boring you all with some of my personal details. I have twins, 12-year-old, a boy and a girl. And when you ask me about trade-offs and choosing between security and usability, it's like choosing between one kid over the other. There are days when one of them is better than the other. I don't say that, right? Of course, there are always days. If you have kids, you realize that on days there's a favorite kid and there's not such a favorite kid. But you've got to lean in and figure out what that looks like. The other example I'll give you, I talked about passwordless. I talk about, I said I'll use a hype word again. Zero trust, right? We've talked about the hype around zero trust for a very long time. I don't know what your personal opinions are, whether it is a hype or not, but it is real. And when I talk about zero trust network access, let's talk about that. When we started doing a POC around that. All kinds of obstacles came into our way. People are like, there's no way this thing is going to be successful, et cetera, et cetera. And now, just to give you a little bit of a background here as well, Twilio is a company that has acquired many companies. And so we have many VPNs in the organization, even today. What does zero trust network access do for me? It takes me away from all of these VPNs into one way of getting access into the organization. And my R&D teams, my engineering teams are huge fans of it because it allows them, again, going back to how busy they are on a regular basis, it allows them to actually focus on doing their jobs versus going from, I've got to go and push code here, so I've got to get into this VPN, then I have to get into another VPN. So it's a VPN-less, example. So I actually want to take a moment to give kudos to the security industry, right? I'm a skeptic, but I'm not that bad. So I want to give kudos to the security industry that a lot of the things that we've been talking about for a very long time are finally, coming to fruition. We are seeing that happen. Experiences are getting better when it comes to security. Well, if I can get and again, leaning into my personal stories, if I can get my mom, who is in her 70s, to use MFA, that means we've come a long way. I kid you not. I mean, if I had shown her how to use MFA 3 or 4 or 5 years back, she would be like, I cannot deal with this thing. And now she actually has, and don't go hacking her, please, but she actually has MFA enabled in several of her applications. So I think that's the journey that we have been taking, and the balance of, when you're talking about security and usability, I think we are getting better. But at the same time, I'm with you. I don't want to negotiate on security. But I also want to celebrate where that balance is getting better. And I want to take a moment to give ourselves kudos as a security industry that we have done a good job there and getting to that point.
So we're definitely making progress then.
We are, and at the end of the day, I'll also say it's a little bit of a shared responsibility, right, between us and our customers, right? So we keep using MFA as an example, which is fine. But it is a shared responsibility, right? A customer has to do something. We have to enable it, but a customer has to go and take an action on it. And if we can make it easier, there are higher chances that someone's actually going to take action.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting that the long path that takes. You're talking about zero trust. I still remember Project Jericho from 20 years ago. That's exactly what it wasn't the buzzword of zero trust, but that's exactly, and it took us 20 years to get to this point, as you say, of being able to remove those VPNs, for example.
Yeah, progress takes time, Avi.
Sorry?
Progress takes time.
Progress takes
right? It takes time.
Yes.
Right? And it makes, I mean, think about it. It makes careers. I'm sitting here as a testament to you, right? I started in security 20 plus years back. And now we are here talking about where it has brought us, right? And I think in our own experiences, we have also recognized. I'm showing my age, by the way, when I talk about where I was and where I am today. But definitely, there's this balance that has come in, and things are getting slightly better. It takes time.
Tilting towards justice.
Tilting towards justice, I like that.
Right. So do you have any advice that you would give to other companies in that same situation? You mentioned take advantage of crises.
Yeah.
Do you have any other advice that you would have for companies facing similar challenges?
Yeah, I think take advantage of crisis goes beyond saying, right? It has to be. The thing that I will talk about while we are on this topic still of how do we have balance between security and usability, right? I think I do want to talk to this point about companies making it simpler and I said that earlier, for our end users, for our consumers, right? Simplicity doesn't come easily, right? I lean into this Mark Twain quote where he had said, and I used this several times in several of my talks, where he had said, hey, I wanted to write a short story, but because I didn't have the time, I wrote a long one instead. And what that means is trying to do simple things takes a long time. And so do things that, from making as a shared, responsibility between us and our customers when it comes to security, do as much as possible, secure by default. Don't bolt on things and then expect your customers to go and do things from a security standpoint, because people are busy. They don't have the time to go and check this box and get MFA enabled and do this, and right. So lean in as much as possible into secure by default. And then I do think that for companies, I think it's possible today, especially with providing better experiences. And really looking at the shared responsibility, educating customers on what you can do better from a security standpoint, right? These are the things that we have enabled. Go do the data. I go back to my data, analysis piece. Go do the data and figure out how many of your customers are actually using the security capabilities that you have put in place. And if they aren't, educate them. Create a blitz around, work with R&D teams, and actually R&D and product teams can go and do that themselves, so that we get to a better state of security. It doesn't come just by enabling features. It comes when actually somebody's using those security features.
I like that message of simplicity is complex.
Yeah, Mark Twain was awesome, wasn't he?
To do it right, it's complicated. So, just before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you if you have any final, we only have a couple minutes left. So I'm going to ask you if you have any final advice you would like to leave with for the audience here, for really any cybersecurity professionals that want to get to that point of being able to provide that value and being able to make balance those trade-offs.
So first I'll say that you are all at an amazing place at an amazing time, right? I talked about the fact that security is super critical today. It was in the past, it's critical today, and it's going to be even more critical in the future, right? And I'm not going to sit here and tell you, hey, your job is to get out of your job. No, it isn't. Your job is to get better at security and to take your R&D teams and your developers along with you to that better state, right? So there's a ton we can do in security, and I think you're at a great spot at a great time. Second thing that I will talk about is do not fall into the trap or the narrative that developers don't care about security. They do. they do care about security, but they just are very busy people. And so work as much as possible in making their life simple, right? Again, leaning into simplicity, making their life simple, understanding what they really need from you, and really getting to the point where you are making developer experience better, right? For that is going to be good for the developers, it's going to be good for, in general, for security as well. And embrace that notion of, developer experience. I really need to lean into that. And then the third thing I will say, and this is an interesting one because of the pivots that I have taken in my life, right? I think a career in security is just the beginning, right? If you want to go do other things after you've spent some time in security, you absolutely can. I actually think that there's not enough cross-pollination that happens. I see a lot of R&D people coming into security. We say that, right? There was a time in my life where I was like, I'm going to bring in software developers and make them into security professionals because they know and they have lived the world of software development and they understand what that feels like. I actually think there's a way, the other way as well. I think security people can absolutely get into product and can get into R&D as well, and that cross-pollination is super critical. And there's a whole world out there that you can take on. I mean, my personal examples were just to show you that a lot is possible, and I'm super honored to be in a spot where I am in, where I've taken the journeys that I've taken. But it's brought me to a place where I continue my passion on security, but I use my role and where I am, my position in the organization, to continue to push the agenda on security.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any last words before we?
Hey, you didn't ask me the question about that you said you would.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek. Star Trek. Absolutely Star Trek. And I don't want to get into a debate, but Star Trek it is. And with
technology is cool.
Technology is cool, sure. But with these words, and these will be my parting words: live long and prosper.